Welcome to Triggered Care. I'm Alex. And today's video is related to Pride Month. Because I've been watching some Pride videos and doing my own little celebrations for myself. And I figured this year I am learning how to express myself and how to advocate for myself. And I have a YouTube channel, so what a better opportunity to come out and talk about it and how it's affected my life a little bit, tell some stories from childhood, and offer validation to other queer folks in the community. I know that I definitely put a lot of my energy into sexual assault awareness and that sort of thing. But it's also important to express the other struggles that I've gone through and looking at how that played into my life and where that's brought me. So, coming out as bisexual and non-binary. So I got, a couple that I've been out with for a while in my real life. Or not my real life, but in my public face-to-face life, I've been out of the closet for a while. I'm very picky, usually about who I come out to, though. Like, my in-laws, I wouldn't have told them about it, even though I was questioning while I was still with my ex-husband now, which that actually did kind of play a part into realizing that we weren't great together. And I've known that was for my non-binary discovery. And then I've known that I've been bisexual for a while, but I didn't actually admit it to myself. Again, until I was married for like 5 or 6 years, where I allowed myself to think about it. And yeah, so let's get into stories about that, about my repression of my sexuality and my gender expression. So let's go on back to middle school years, childhood years, because this is when I really remember the struggle that was really hard to deal with when you're in an abusive household. Like, I'm getting abused anyway, and so, like, this struggle and pain was kind of lost in the stuff for a while in recovery. So, in middle school, I started experimenting with my gender expression. I really, really disliked girls' clothes, women's clothes, and so I got a job when I was like 12. So I was able to go to Goodwill and buy boy clothes. And I would always get pants that were really baggy, like baggy boy cargo pants and t-shirts, a lot of graphic tees and sweatshirts and hoodies. And everything was very baggy. I always got things a few sizes too large. And part of that was I really hated my body in that moment of time. While I was going through puberty, while I was going through adolescence, I hated my body, and there was just screaming in my head all the time of, this is not right. I am a boy. And I remember wishing that people could see that I was a boy. And I was homeschooled through middle school, and my struggle with how people perceived me definitely played into that, where going to middle school and with all my friends being survivors themselves, they were engaging in sexual activity way earlier than, typical children. And it made me extremely uncomfortable because, first of all, I didn't want to be a part of it. And second of all, it was highlighted to me all the time that I'm a girl. And it was too much, to where I asked my mother to be homeschooled, which led to pedophiles online. But I was trying to escape the pain of that, of confronting how people perceived me and the misalignment. But I didn't know anything about being transgender. I live in a rural area of Wisconsin. There wasn't a lot of resources or information about that stuff at all. I didn't know that I was going through this experience that other people could relate to in the slightest bit. I just felt broken, along with being raised in a super religious household. So even if there was resources in the area, I was shielded by that, by going to church all the time and getting that, narrative that you normal, good church living. So that made me repress a lot anyway. And so I got homeschooled. I bought all the boy clothes I could. I bought. And then my mother would buy me blouses and like dresses, and she would force me to wear makeup sometimes. And I would, just because I didn't want to fight her. I didn't want that to be an argument between us of like, this makes me feel gross. I really, really hate it. I really hate getting frilled up. And and I cried all the time. Like, I just nonstop cried for years. And part of that was probably the sexual abuse going on. But another part of that was just feeling wrong and just feeling unable to feel right with myself. And I remember being online on an online school thing, and I just had my name as Alex on there. And we'd go to the threads, and what the threads were it was like a chat room for the students to come and connect with each other. And my name on there was just Alex, and so I would talk to people about whatever, Lord of the Rings, or whatever interests I had at the time. That was a long time ago, so I don't remember specifics. But I go on there, and sometimes people would call me he and him. Because of, if we're talking about nerdy lore or whatever it is, that I'm contributing to this conversation, and I'm making my gender ambiguous on purpose, because that would make me feel so good of like, oh, somebody sees me. And it's hard. It's really hard when that is a struggle that you're having amongst all your other struggles of being abused and feeling ignored, and just having to deal with that by yourself and having nobody to relate to. And it was so shameful. It felt so shameful that it was one of those things where just like another trauma of there's nothing I can do about it. I was born this way. God made me this way. So I just have to learn how to deal with it. And then high school rolled around. I went to public high school. And I was still wearing boys' clothes. But they were my clothes, but they were from the boys section. And my mother had continually tried to buy me fancy girl clothes, and she forced me to wear them on like picture day and stuff like that. Or, she had a big influence on how I would go to dances and just slapping makeup on my face when I need to be presentable. I got used to that. If my mother felt like her reputation was on the line with my public appearance somewhere, she would force me to put makeup on and wear whatever. And again, I would not fight it, because I had no fight left for myself. I had no fight to express myself or to voice anything that I wanted, because she tortured me for a long time and hated me. And so it was like, well, if she knows this about me, that puts me at risk. That puts me at a higher risk. But I still wore the boy clothes. And I still pissed her off that way. Even though I couldn't express it with my voice, it was still like so much turmoil that I had to express it. But I would wear the girl clothes too, and what ended up happening is I would get girl clothes, but I would get the most hippie of, interesting girl clothes that I could find. It became a hobby of mine to go and look for like weird hipster hippie like clothes that kind of reminded me of like making clothes out of garbage. And I really enjoyed that style for a bit. Or like really simple clothes, like the hipster where it like replicates the clothing style of Pioneer Days or whatever. I also enjoy that because I enjoy fantasy quite a bit. And so, I did add in like a feminine part of my taste of clothes through high school. Now, I started getting girl crushes, I don't even know, in elementary school. I didn't allow myself to think about it until high school because it was very overpowering sometimes. But rural area, religious background, I just was like, it's just normal. It's just normal for girls to have girl crushes, and you just can't act on them. And that's what I told myself for 10 years. So I'm like, oh, like, and I've been intimate with women, but it was always like, oh, this is just a phase. Like, I totally just closeted myself, and whenever that part of myself would bubble up too much, I'd just be like, like, whatever, it doesn't matter because I'm a lady. Just falling into those stereotypes that are so harmful and, keep me in that closet. But just wanting to mask and wanting to be like, no, nothing strange over here, because the amount of harassment that goes on in country towns against people who go against the norm it's intense. Even though I wasn't out of the closet, I was called butch, I was called lesbian, I was called all these things. And there's actually a story that I want to share from going to youth group, because at the youth group there were the rapey boys that I've talked about before, but we don't need to spend any more time on them. And then there was a lady friend that I had, and both of us were queer, but again, the town that we were in, we didn't really talk about it. We just hung out a lot, and we were very close physically. We would cuddle a lot and hold hands. Like, we were doing some coupley stuff. But when she tried to put a label on that, like, she ended up writing me a letter, and it was really sweet. But I'm going off track. But there was that dynamic going on at church. And the church leader got suspicious of my behavior, because the boys would chase me around, and then I would be intimate with this lady. And so, Blue's Clues to this church leader, she calls my mother one night, and she has this conversation with my mother about how I'm going down the wrong path. I'm going down the path of Satan. And that, and my mother, like, what are you talking about? And this church leader was like, Alex is a boy crazy lesbian. So she outed me. She outed me so hard But she didn't know how to say bisexual. It confounded her brain. I was just the devil spawn, just running up like, oh, I'm attracted to everybody up in here, and it spooked her. It spooked her bad. And my mother, probably crap talked me, but she didn't tell me that part of the conversation. She's just like, yeah, it's really funny. Ha ha ha. I'm like, ha ha ha, yeah, that's silly. Like, what? That's crazy. I don't know what you're talking about. And then after that, one day my mother was driving me to school, or driving me from school. I don't remember, but we were in the car, and then she turns and she looks at me and she goes, Alex, are you a lesbian? I'm like, no, I like boys. I like boys a lot, which was true, which is why I could say that, is because I did like boys a lot. And it made me so nervous. And then she was pointing out my masculine clothing choices. And she's like, well, you dress like a boy. And it's like, well, they're more comfortable. They make me more comfortable. I don't know what else to tell you. And that has nothing to do with who I'm attracted to. Which is true. Your gender expression has nothing to do with who you're attracted to. But it was a lot of dodging those questions. Not only from my mother, but from myself as well. I'm going to try to finish this up. But, I repressed it and I denied it until a few years ago when I was still married. And it was way easier realizing, oh, I'm bisexual. Because, that was such an obvious denial. Like, when I reflected back on it, like, oh yeah, I've denied my attraction to women for a long time. So there's that. It was much harder with my gender expression and my gender identity. That was a much harder path to go down because it's so stigmatized. Along with, I was married and I was terrified of how my husband would react if I decided to wear things that I wanted to wear. And if I decided to explore pronoun usage and all those sorts of things, and exploring where I fit in the world on the gender spectrum, or off the gender spectrum, non-binary. There's no two sides. It's all over. But even like stepping into it, I was terrified. And so it took me a while of just researching, and like I wanted to make sure that I researched enough to be comfortable, and dealing with not only dysphoria memories, but current day dysphoria. And then finding where I feel right in the world while in a marriage with a man who wants me to be very feminine, who wants me to look a certain way, and wants me to fit into the family picture a certain way. That was a huge red flag for me, where I'm like, that's reminding me of being in middle school and trying to express myself and then getting glared at for it, or having that disappointment put on me, like, oh my God, you're not how I wanted you to be. And so, to other survivors in the queer community, in the LGBTQIA plus community, thank you for sticking around. Thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for validating other people in the community. It's been difficult. And, I want to advocate I also feel like I'm learning so much every day that I don't want to speak ignorantly on it. So I figured today I could just talk about some of my stuff and what I went through with it. There's a lot left that I have yet to learn before I would feel as comfortable advocating for specific things in the community. Or I just feel like there's people way better well versed on that specific stuff, because I've dunked my head into trauma and my queer knowledge is really limited because I kept myself closeted for so long. And so I'm still in the, like, just absorbing the good feelings and finding support through the queer community, which has gone off this year. And I feel really blessed to have friends that I can relate to. It's so nice, and it's like finding a home, like a home base of, if I go here, I will be understood, and I'll be able to put my hair down for a bit and just be myself, and everybody here is okay with that. And that means so much. And I feel lucky that I have those connections, because I lived with them or without them for a really long time, and that was really hard. And it was really hard for forever. I mean, it's still hard. If I cut my hair too short, I still get yelled at. And I am nearly 30 years old, and I still get yelled at for having too short of hair or wearing men's clothes out and about. I still get harassed for that. I still get glared at, and, you know, people putting that expectation on me. But some days I want to be spicy, and it's like, you know what? I'm going to wear what I want to wear, and then y'all can glare at me, and it can confound your head that I don't fit your stereotypical whatever. But that's even stupid. Nobody should fit any stereotypes. Everybody be themselves, and let's just be happy that we're all different. So that's, yeah, that got a little emotional, and I'm processing a lot. But I wanted to take a break from, you know, my life and actually talk about something that I want to offer solidarity and validation for the people who need it, and awareness for people who aren't aware of what it's like. So, thank y'all. I love y'all. I hope y'all have good ones.